Imagine stepping across the threshold of a typical American suburban home in 1955. The first thing that hits you isn't a smell or a sight, but a specific kind of living quiet. Unlike the digital silence of today, which is often punctuated by the surgical pings of smartphones, or the invisible data stream hum of a Wi-Fi router, this was a physical, mechanical silence. It was a silence you could feel in your bones, waiting to be interrupted by the rhythmic heartbeat of a house that felt truly permanent. In the kitchen, the refrigerator didn't just exist. It performed. Modern appliances are designed to be forgotten. But the mid-century fridge was a mechanical beast that cycled on and off with a purposeful, vibrating hum. It was a constant reminder of the technology keeping your family fed. Nearby, the coffee ritual provided the morning's first symphony. The glass knob of a percolator would begin to dance as the water reached a boil, creating a rhythmic bubble-pause-bubble sequence. That wet, percussive glug-glug sound served as a low-tech alarm clock for millions, signaling that the day had officially begun. Even the architecture spoke to you. When you walked across the living room, the hardwood floors didn't just support you, they groaned and settled under your weight. The furniture, too, was vocal. Heavy couch springs would creak as you sat, a sound of heavy-duty steel meeting fabric. Doors were not the hollow core boards we often see today. There were solid slabs of wood that closed with a deep, authoritative thud. This wasn't just noise, it was the sound of stability. Every clack, thump, and hiss told you that your world was solid, tangible, and built to last. But while the house had its own rhythm, the way we spoke to the outside world required a level of patience that would feel like torture today. Do you remember the mechanical weight of the telephone? Communication in the mid-century wasn't a tap-and-swipe affair. It was an intentional, physical act. At the center of this was the rotary phone, perhaps the most iconic sound maker of the 20th century. To make a call, you didn't just press a button. You engaged with a machine. You placed your finger in the heavy plastic dial, pulled it clockwise until it hit the metal finger stop, and then released. The sound that followed was a rapid mechanical click, 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 as the dial spun back to its starting position. If you were dialing a number with many nines south or O south, the process was slow, demanded your time and your focus. Each digit had its own weight and duration. And when the phone actually rang, it wasn't a polite marimba melody or a haptic vibration. It was a loud brass bell clanging that was physically impossible to ignore. It commanded the entire household's attention, sending family members racing from different rooms to answer the call. When the conversation was over, there was a finality that we've lost in the era of ending a call with a silent screen tap. You took the heavy receiver and dropped it into the cradle, resulting in a solid, echoing thunk. That sound signaled the definitive end of a connection. The conversation didn't linger in a cloud or a text thread. It was finished. If you called and no one answered, you were met with a persistent, lonely ringing that eventually gave way to total silence. There was no voicemail to catch your words, no missed call notification to alert the recipient. You simply hung up and waited to try again later. The phone wasn't the only thing that required waiting, though. In the living room, a different kind of electrical ritual was beginning, one that involved a faint, high-pitched whine and a glowing glass tube. The mid-century kitchen was often described as a sound lab because of the sheer variety of materials in motion. Today's kitchens are full of plastic and soft-close hinges, but the 1950s kitchen was a place of metal, ceramic, and glass. Metal utensils clinked sharply against heavy ceramic plates, and cabinet doors snapped shut with a definitive crack of magnets or spring latches. Drawers didn't glide on silent ball bearings. They slid with the friction-filled sound of wood on wood or metal on metal. In the corner, the radio was the heartbeat of the room. It wasn't just background noise. It was a constant companion that delivered news, afternoon soap operas, and variety shows. Because these were analog devices, you often heard the warm-up of the vacuum tubes, a soft hum that grew into the clear voice of a broadcaster. Outside, the early morning soundtrack was defined by the glass-and-glass clink of milk bottles being delivered to the porch. Inside, dinner was announced not by a group text, but by the sharp, clear ring of a physical bell or a mother's voice carrying through the halls. The television was perhaps the most magical sound maker of the era. You didn't just press power and see a 4K image. You turned the heavy knob and then you waited. First, there was a soft electrical buzz, followed by a very faint, high-pitched whine as the cathode ray tube warmed up. Slowly, the picture would fade in from a single white dot in the center of the screen. It was an anticipatory sound, the sound of the world coming into your living room. But what happened when you stepped past the front door? The neighborhood had its own symphony, a mix of gas engines and the unfiltered laughter of a generation that lived outdoors. Stepping out onto a mid-century suburban street was like entering a different auditory ecosystem. While modern suburbs can feel eerily quiet due to air conditioning, keeping people indoors and electric cars gliding by, the 1950s outdoors was unapologetically loud. Lawnmowers were not the dampened machines of today. They were raw, gas-powered engines that roared across the block. Sprinklers provided a rhythmic counterpoint, or metalheads ticking ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-tik-tik-tik- as they rotated across the emerald green lawns. The neighborhood was filled with the sounds of children, but those sounds weren't muffled by headphones. You heard the metallic ring of bike bells and the unmistakable crack of a wooden baseball bat hitting a ball. Because there were no screens to keep kids stationary, the air was filled with unfiltered laughter and shouting that echoed freely between the houses. Every few minutes, the sharp slap of a screen door slamming shut would signal another child running in for a glass of water or heading back out to play. Even the cars sounded heavy. Engines didn't purr. They rumbled with a deep, throaty vibration. When a car door closed, it wasn't a plastic click. It was a heavy metal thump that suggested tons of American steel meeting a frame. In the distance, the long, low, mournful wail of a train horn might cut across the town, a sound that felt like it was pulling the listener toward a distant, unseen horizon. The air didn't just feel different, it sounded more alive. While the neighborhood was a place of play, the sounds of the working world were far more relentless. Have you ever heard the cha-ching of a real cash register, or the rhythmic clatter of 50 typewriters? The sounds of work and school in mid-century America were defined by physical impact. In the classroom, the primary interface wasn't a tablet or a laptop. It was the blackboard. The sound of chalk scraping against slate was a constant, sometimes a smooth glide, sometimes a sharp squeak that would make the whole class cringe. When a teacher asked everyone to follow along, you'd hear the collective whoosh of paper as dozens of pages were turned in perfect unison. Even the school bells were different. They were actual metal bells that clanged with a vibrating metallic energy, rather than the synthesized beeps used today. In the professional world, the office was a cacophony of mechanical progress. The dominant sound was the typewriter. It wasn't the soft, membrane click of a modern keyboard. It was a rhythmic, relentless clatter of metal keys, striking a ribbon and platen. Each keystroke was a physical event you could hear. When the typist reached the end of a line, a small bell would ding, followed by the sharp zip of the carriage return. In this era, you could literally hear productivity happening. A busy office sounded like a factory for ideas. The world of commerce had its own distinct audio signatures as well. When you bought something at a local store, the cash register didn't just display a number. It rang out with a bright, metallic cha-ching as the drawer kicked open. Workers at the end of their shifts didn't tap a badge. They inserted a heavy card into a time clock that stamped the time with a loud, mechanical thwack. Every aspect of the workday had a soundtrack, and that soundtrack was unmistakable. As the workday ended, the high-energy clatter of the city gave way to something else. The evening brought a new kind of quiet one that culminated in a national silence we will never experience again. As the sun began to set, the auditory landscape of the home shifted into a lower gear. The high-energy clink of the kitchen softened as dinner plates were washed and dried, the sound of running water in the sink acting as a transitional white noise for the family. The radio, which had been a constant companion all day, was turned down in volume. This was the time for the family huddle around the television, the one and only screen in the house. The evening was defined by shared sounds. You would hear the familiar opening theme music of a favorite variety show, followed by the distinctive warm sound of a live studio audience laughing in the distance. Because there were only a few channels, your neighbors were likely hearing the exact same sounds at the exact same time. It was a communal auditory experience that modern on-demand streaming has largely dismantled. But the most striking sound of the evening was the one that happened at the very end, the sign-off. In the mid-century, TV stations didn't run 24 hours a day. At midnight or 1 a.m., the station would play the national anthem, and then nothing. The screen would fade to a test pattern or static, and a national silence would settle over the country. There was no endless scrolling or autoplay to keep you awake. The house would settle for the night with only the chirping of crickets outside, the wind in the trees, and the persistent tick-tock of a wall clock to mark the passing hours. We've gained so much technology since then, but in the process, we've traded these emotional anchors for a sea of digital noise. Are the sounds we have today worth what we've lost? Looking back, it's clear that our modern world is significantly louder than the mid-century, yet it is strangely less memorable. We are bombarded with more sounds than ever before: notifications, digital chirps, synthesized alerts, but we remember fewer of them because they lack the physical soul of the past. In mid-century America, there were fewer distinct noises, but because they were mechanical and tactile, each one mattered. They were emotional anchors that told you exactly where you were and who you were with. Those sounds marked the passage of time in a way that a digital clock never can. The thunk of a phone, the hiss of a percolator, and the clack of a typewriter weren't just background noise. They were the signals of connection, nourishment, and hard work. They shaped the daily life of an entire generation, providing a sense of rhythm and routine that felt grounded in reality. Once you hear them again, even if only in your mind, you realize that the past didn't just look different, it had a completely different frequency. Some sounds, like the clinking of milk bottles or the roar of a rotary phone dial, should never be forgotten. They are the auditory heritage of a world that was slower, heavier, and perhaps a bit more intentional. By listening to the past, we can better understand the world we've built today, and perhaps find a way to bring a bit of that living quiet back into our lives. Which of these sounds do you miss the most? Or is there a specific sound from your own childhood that you think today's generation will never get to experience? Let's build a sound archive together. Drop your memories in the comments below. If this journey through the ears of the past moved you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might remember the tick-tock of a simpler time. Till next time, keep listening to the past.